Arthur had learned, through a long series of trials and errors, that sometimes it was best to keep Jeff in the dark about certain plans. Today was one of those days. They were headed to the airport for what Arthur had hoped would be a relatively uneventful domestic flight, a quick getaway, no frills. But this was Jeff, and nothing with Jeff ever went smoothly. He glanced over at his demonic friend, who sat unusually quiet in the passenger seat, hands folded in his lap. Suspiciously quiet, Arthur thought. Jeff's usual antics were replaced by an odd sort of stillness, and that made Arthur nervous. "We're here," Arthur announced, pulling up to the curb at the airport drop-off. Jeff slowly turned to face him, his yellow eyes wide with fear. "We're going flying?" Jeff whispered, his voice oddly fragile for someone who had once faced down a pack of rabid squirrels without flinching. Arthur nodded. "Yep. You've been on about 100 crazy adventures, Jeff. I figured it was time to experience something a bit more normal." Jeff gulped, gripping the car door as if it was his lifeline. "Flying? In the sky?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. Yeah. That's usually how planes work. Don't tell me you've never flown before." "Never," Jeff muttered, eyes fixed on the airport's massive glass entrance as if it were the gates to some mystical other world. "I always assumed I'd just grow wings if I needed to. Planes, though? They're just big metal boxes defying the laws of nature." Arthur couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Wait, you're scared of flying?" Jeff scoffed, but his voice cracked a little. "Scared? Me? Please. What if we fly too close to the sun? Or get sucked into another dimension? These things happen, Arthur." Arthur stared at him, trying to suppress a laugh. "Jeff, we're flying from here to Chicago. There's zero chance of dimensional vortexes or solar disasters." Jeff crossed his arms defensively, mumbling under his breath. "That's what they want you to think," convincing Jeff to board. Arthur sighed. "Okay, look, flying is completely safe. Safer than, well, just about anything else you've dragged me into. It's like sitting on a couch, but in the air." Jeff narrowed his eyes, clearly not buying it. "Couches don't randomly fall out of the sky, Arthur." True, Arthur thought, but there was no way he was going to let Jeff back out now. "All right, how about this? If something goes wrong, you can use your demon powers to float us safely to the ground, right?" Jeff perked up slightly, considering it. I suppose I could create a portal mid-air if things get too dicey. Or maybe summon a giant eagle?" "Exactly," Arthur said, relieved that Jeff was at least thinking about it. "Now come on, let's go check in. You'll love it once we're up in the air, trust me." Jeff nodded hesitantly, though his pace toward the check-in counter resembled that of someone marching to their doom. As they reached the counter, Arthur handed over their IDs, keeping a watchful eye on Jeff, who was staring at the conveyor belts moving the luggage like they were magical beasts swallowing the bags whole. "Do they check for flying monsters in there?" Jeff whispered, leaning in close to Arthur. "I've heard stories about things hiding in luggage. People open their suitcases and bam! There's a tentacled beast ready to pounce." Arthur groaned. "Jeff, no monsters. This is just an airport, not a cursed treasure vault." The lady at the counter handed back their boarding passes, looking mildly amused by Jeff's intense stare at the baggage carousel. Jeff leaned in, whispering, "Keep an eye out. Those bags look suspiciously calm." Arthur gently pushed Jeff toward the escalators, hoping to avoid any more delays. But just as they reached the top of the stairs, Jeff froze. "Wait." He turned to Arthur, eyes wide with realization. "We didn't prepare properly for this." Arthur sighed. "Jeff, we're fine. We've got our tickets, our bags, everything's under control." No, Jeff shook his head frantically. "We need parachutes, survival gear, snacks that can survive at high altitudes. You didn't tell me we were going to be flying." "You packed a bugle and a grappling hook for a hike," Arthur retorted. "I'm pretty sure you'll be fine without a parachute." "But that was different," Jeff protested. "This is sky territory. We're leaving solid ground behind. We need sky snacks." "Sky snacks?" Arthur echoed, already knowing he was losing this argument. Jeff nodded. "Yeah, special snacks that won't explode at high altitudes. You can never be too careful." He glanced around, his eyes locking onto a gift shop. Give me 5 minutes. Before Arthur could stop him, Jeff sprinted into the airport's gift shop, immediately causing a stir among the employees with his enthusiastic rummaging. Arthur followed, trying to keep up. Jeff darted from aisle to aisle, picking up the most bizarre items. A foam neck pillow, which he declared would make an excellent emergency flotation device. A pair of sunglasses, for a cool exit in case of an emergency landing. And a stack of in-flight magazines, for bartering with sky pirates, of course. Jeff, we don't need any of this, Arthur said, trying to wrestle the 5th pair of sunglasses from his hands. Jeff held firm, his eyes wild. Don't you understand? We're going into the unknown. We need to be ready for anything. What if the plane gets taken over by cloud thieves? We could trade these sunglasses for our lives. Arthur groaned, pushing Jeff toward the checkout counter. You watch too many movies. Don't forget the special edition neck pillow. Jeff called to the cashier, who looked thoroughly confused by the entire situation. With Jeff finally loaded up with his sky survival kit, they rushed toward security, the flight departure looming closer by the minute. I can't believe you're more afraid of flying than, I don't know, battling an ancient curse or swimming with sharks, Arthur muttered as they approached the TSA checkpoint. Jeff shot him a serious look. Flying is different, Arthur. It's unnatural. Arthur stifled a laugh. Sure, says the guy who once tried to ride a dragon for fun. The journey through airport security was, as Arthur feared, a disaster waiting to happen. As they approached the TSA checkpoint, Jeff's eyes darted nervously around the room, sizing up the security agents like they were about to engage in a high-stakes poker game. Arthur tried to keep Jeff focused, but his friend was far too absorbed in the life-or-death situation at hand. Remember, Jeff whispered. This is where they scan for interdimensional beings and enchanted objects. We have to play it cool. Arthur, now on edge, glanced at Jeff's bulging backpack. Please tell me you didn't pack anything weird. Jeff avoided eye contact. Define weird. Arthur sighed deeply. No, Jeff. What did you pack? Jeff hesitated, then mumbled, Only the essentials. Arthur groaned. Essentials for what? A medieval quest? Look, Jeff said, gripping his backpack protectively. You can never be too prepared. If something goes wrong in the air, I've got a grappling hook, parachute cord, a manual on surviving in zero gravity, and, of course, my trusty Kazoo. Arthur was about to respond, but it was too late. They'd reached the front of the security line. Chaos at security. Jeff confidently strutted forward, his confidence barely masking the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. He took off his shoes, placed his bag on the conveyor belt, and stepped through the metal detector with his arms raised high, as though expecting applause for his flawless performance. Then the alarms went off. A chorus of beeps echoed through the security area as Jeff stared at the flashing lights in utter confusion. Arthur facepalmed, knowing this was going to be a long ordeal. The TSA agent, a burly man with a no-nonsense attitude, approached Jeff. Sir, please step aside for additional screening. Jeff's eyes widened. Ah, I see. You've detected my supernatural aura. Very sensitive machines you've got here. I'm impressed. The agent's expression remained blank. Please, step over here, sir. Arthur watched from a distance, torn between laughing and cringing as Jeff was led to the side. The TSA agent unzipped Jeff's overstuffed backpack, only to pause as he pulled out a tangle of parachute cord, a giant inflatable neck pillow, and a kazoo. Sir, the agent said slowly, why do you have a grappling hook? Ah, yes, Jeff replied, looking serious. You see, I'm prepared for any mid-air emergencies. Grappling hook? Perfect for in-flight rescues? Parachute cord? Well, we might have to tie things down. The kazoo? For morale. You wouldn't believe how much better people feel when you play a solid kazoo tune during Turbulence. The agent stared blankly at Jeff, his disbelief evident. You're not allowed to bring this on board. But, no buts, sir. It's not allowed. Jeff's shoulders slumped, his bravado shrinking. Fine, take the grappling hook, but I'm keeping the kazoo. Arthur, watching from afar, could barely contain his laughter as Jeff returned, his essential gear reduced to the inflatable neck pillow and kazoo. Well, that could have been worse, Arthur said. Jeff scowled. They confiscated my grappling hook, Arthur. How am I supposed to swing from plane to plane without it? Arthur chuckled. You weren't supposed to swing from planes at all, Jeff. That's the whole point of flying. Jeff huffed, but before he could argue, they heard the boarding announcement for their flight. Boarding the plane. As they reached the gate, Arthur couldn't help but notice that Jeff was still a little jittery, though he was doing his best to hide it. His usual bravado had returned, but Arthur could tell the thought of actually being in the sky was still gnawing at him. "We made it to the gate without being arrested, so that's a win," Arthur said, trying to lighten the mood as they handed over their boarding passes. Jeff nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. "These are my people, Arthur. My fellow Sky Warriors." "They're just passengers, Jeff," Arthur said flatly. Jeff, however, was having none of it. As they walked down the jet bridge, Jeff began whispering to the passengers nearby. "You guys ready for the skies? It's dangerous up there, but if we stick together, we'll make it. Sky pirates? No biggie. Sudden black hole? We've got this. Remember? Brace for impact if we meet a rogue cloud." Arthur grabbed Jeff's arm, pulling him away from a bewildered elderly couple. "For the love of everything, Jeff, just get on the plane without making friends." As they stepped onto the plane, Jeff's eyes went wide. "It's so big. It's like a giant metal dragon, but with less fire." A flight attendant greeted them with a smile. "Welcome aboard." Jeff grinned, handing her one of his self-made flight manuals. "I made this for the crew, in case you ever encounter unusual situations." The flight attendant blinked at the colorful pamphlet, which had doodles of winged monsters, instructions on how to negotiate with sky pirates, and a section called Heroic Exits. Thank you?" Arthur sighed, dragging Jeff to their seats. "You're going to get us kicked off before we even leave the ground." They found their seats, right near the middle of the plane. Jeff sat down and immediately started fiddling with his seatbelt. "This thing, it's like a trap. I'm not convinced this is even necessary." Arthur leaned back, exasperated. "It's just a seatbelt, Jeff. You're fine." After what felt like an eternity of Jeff grumbling about inferior mortal safety measures, the engines roared to life, and the plane began to taxi. Jeff's eyes darted around. "This is it, Arthur. We're leaving the safety of solid ground. I hope you're prepared for, well, anything." Arthur rolled his eyes. "You're the one who should be prepared, Mr. Sky Snacks." Jeff clutched his inflatable neck pillow like it was a life vest. "We've got the pillow. We've got the kazoo. If things go south, we improvise." The plane accelerated down the runway, and as they lifted off, Jeff's face went from excitement to wide-eyed terror. "We're actually flying." Arthur nodded, trying not to laugh. "Yup. Welcome to the skies." Jeff gripped the armrests, knuckles white. I don't know if we were meant to do this." Arthur grinned. "Too late to turn back now, buddy." And with that, their flight had officially begun, with Jeff still teetering between his usual bravado and absolute panic. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, the tension in the cabin seemed to dissipate. Everywhere except for Jeff's seat, where his fingers were still clamped around the armrests like they might fly off at any moment. His wide eyes flicked between the seatbelt sign and the clouds outside the window, his usual confidence completely absent. "Arthur," Jeff whispered hoarsely, his voice a little shaky. "How are we still up here? It doesn't make sense. We're floating in the sky." Arthur, finally relaxing into his seat, gave him a sideways glance. "That's kind of how flying works. We're not floating, we're flying. Big metal wings and all that." Jeff shook his head as if the laws of physics were personally betraying him. "I should have packed my wings. I'd feel better if I could just sprout some and take control." "You don't have wings," Arthur reminded him, his amusement evident. "But hey, at least you still have the kazoo." Jeff patted his inflatable neck pillow for reassurance, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the kazoo. "Good thinking. If things get dicey, I'll lead us in a morale-boosting tune." "Please don't," Arthur groaned, already imagining the chaos that would ensue. "I beg you." Jeff looked down at the tiny seatbelt in his lap, tugging at it as if it was some complex puzzle. "This seatbelt is not doing enough. It's too small. What if we fly into a storm and the plane flips upside down? We need something stronger, like duct tape." Before Arthur could respond, the seatbelt sign turned off, and Jeff shot up like a rocket. "Freedom!" he declared, only to freeze mid-celebration as the plane hit a minor bump of turbulence. His eyes widened as he slammed back into his seat. "That wasn't a normal bump, was it? I think we're under attack." Arthur rolled his eyes. It's just turbulence, Jeff. Totally normal. Normal for what? Jeff gasped. A mid-air battle with a flock of rogue birds? Maybe a sky pirate raid? He leaned over and squinted out the window. Do you think I can see them? I bet they're hiding behind clouds, waiting to strike. Arthur pinched the bridge of his nose. There are no sky pirates, Jeff. You need to calm down. But Jeff wasn't listening. He had already begun fidgeting in his seat, making plans. Okay. Plan of action. I'll hold off the pirates with the Kazoo. If they manage to board, I'll distract them with my in-flight magazine collection. We'll need to fortify our position. Grab your neck pillow, Arthur. It's time to build a pillow fort for defense. Arthur couldn't help but laugh, despite himself. We are not building a pillow fort on a commercial airline. Jeff looked genuinely hurt by the refusal, but was quickly distracted by the flight attendants rolling the beverage cart down the aisle. Wait! Snacks! Sky snacks! He flagged down a flight attendant. Excuse me, miss. Do you have any snacks that won't explode at high altitudes? The flight attendant blinked. No, sir, but we have pretzels. Jeff leaned back, clearly disappointed. Pretzels? They're not battle-ready, but they'll have to do. As Jeff munched on his pretzels, a slight rumble ran through the plane, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some light turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts. Jeff froze mid-pretzel, his eyes locking with Arthur's. Arthur, this is it. The moment we've trained for. Arthur sighed. We haven't trained for anything. Jeff frantically grabbed his inflatable neck pillow and pulled it over his head like a helmet. I've seen this before in movies. First, it's light turbulence, and then boom. We're dodging lightning bolts, spiraling through the clouds. Get ready, Arthur. Brace yourself. Jeff immediately assumed what he thought was a brace position, which involved hugging his knees and whistling an urgent kazoo tune. The surrounding passengers stared, confused, and Arthur could only shake his head. The turbulence lasted all of 30 seconds, a few light bumps that barely disturbed anyone's beverages. But to Jeff, it felt like a full-blown crisis. When the plane returned to smooth sailing, Jeff popped his head up from his makeshift safety bubble, breathing a heavy sigh of relief. We survived, Jeff whispered, looking around in awe. I thought for sure the sky pirates were making their move. Arthur laughed, wiping tears from his eyes. It was just a bit of turbulence, Jeff. No pirates, no rogue birds. Just a bumpy patch of air. Jeff leaned back in his seat, exhausted but proud. We faced the dangers of the sky, Arthur, and we lived to tell the tale. I didn't even have to use the kazoo as a distraction. I think everyone's grateful for that, Arthur muttered. The landing. As the plane began its descent, Jeff suddenly perked up again. Are we going down? This is it, isn't it? The final challenge, the landing. Arthur looked out the window as the city's skyline came into view. Yup, this is it. Prepare yourself, Jeff. We're about to hit solid ground again. Jeff straightened in his seat, gripping the armrests. All right, we've trained for this. Solid ground. I remember it well. He paused. What if the ground isn't as solid as we think? What if we land and... Jeff, for the love of everything, we are just landing, Arthur said, chuckling. No monsters, no sinking ground, no pirates. Just a normal, safe landing. The plane touched down smoothly, rolling along the runway as Jeff peered out the window, eyes wide. I can't believe it. We made it. We flew, Arthur. We flew through the air, like magical creatures. Arthur nodded. Yup. And now we get off the plane, like normal people. As the plane came to a stop, Jeff unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up, and dramatically saluted the cabin. Thank you, brave travelers. We have conquered the skies. Arthur grabbed Jeff by the arm and pulled him toward the exit before Jeff could hand out more flight manuals to the passengers. As they walked through the airport, Jeff had a newfound bounce in his step. Arthur, I have to say, flying wasn't half bad. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and confusing, but in the end, I think I conquered my fear. Arthur glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. You screamed at turbulence and tried to build a pillow fort. Jeff waved him off. Details, Arthur. Details. The point is, I faced my fears, and now I'm practically an expert. Arthur snorted. Expert at what? In-flight kazoo playing? Jeff grinned, holding up the kazoo proudly. It's a skill, my friend. A valuable skill. As they walked through the terminal, Jeff was already making plans. Next time, we should try something even crazier. Maybe skydiving, or a hot air balloon race. Or better yet, let's ride a dragon across the Atlantic. Arthur groaned. Let's just get home first. With that, they headed toward the baggage claim, Jeff still chattering away about his next sky adventure, leaving behind a plane full of confused passengers who would surely never forget the time they shared the skies with Jeff the Demon.